Hello everyone, Edain here, and welcome back to the Edain mod, where we're ranking possibly the strongest faction in the game, Mordor, and one of my favourites, personally. Mordor has so much just to give in general. Ever since 4.8, 4.0 even, the very beginning of Edain 4.0, even going back to 3.8, Mordor has had so much going for them. Compare them to vanilla Battle for Middle of Mordor, it's like night and day. It's amazing what the Edain team have done to this faction, and I could keep singing their praises all day, but I have got things to talk about. So their roster is probably one of the best, if not the best, hero rosters in the game. In fact, I even did a poll, and Mordor got about 50% of the votes out of about 250 people. So a lot of people are in agreement that Mordor is definitely the strongest out of the evil factions. But what would they be compared to the good factions? Well, let's begin by talking about their scout hero. But before I do, quickly, just let me remind everyone who doesn't already know. The rankings go as follows. A tier, they're the perfect hero. B tier, they're above average. C tier, they're average. D tier, they're below average. And E tier, I believe they need a rework. Now, Mordor, we first start with Gorbag, who technically is not just Gorbag. There is also Shagrat, but we're going to talk about all of Gorbag's abilities before we get into Shagrat, because the fact that there's a mix of two heroes together with different abilities is what makes this hero, for me, B tier. The only weakness is that, and the reason he's not A tier, is because their scouting abilities are very, very limited. I'm going to destroy this because it's making so much noise. So, firstly, Gorbag, his first ability can turn to Shagrat. He does not get it immediately as he levels up, as he comes onto the field. It's like a minute or two before you can use it, and it takes about another minute or two before you can swap back. And you can see here, Shagrat has can temporarily do area damage and has more armor, while Gorbag has poison damage and attacks faster. So if you want single target damage, you go for Gorbag. You want a more AoE and tougher hero, you go for Shagrat. Gorbag can summon a sniffer. There can be up to 3 sniffers per building. But the main thing about the sniffer is the fact that when it's summoned, it is in itself the scouting ability of Mordor, that outside of the Eye of Sauron, of course. Having this ability, or having this power, makes scouting not as necessary for Mordor as it does for other factions. But as you can see, the vision on that sniffer is really good. It's all front-loaded, though. So do make sure you're paying attention to what way he's facing. And he's a little weak, so do expect him to die if you're not paying attention to him. But other than that, good level 1 ability. Shagrat does something else, which I will talk about when I get onto Shagrat. But then his second ability, Gorbag, has the Greed. Every time he hits an enemy building, while this ability is active, he gives you 10 resources. This doesn't sound a lot, but don't forget he does have faster attack speed, so it is impactful over time. And it's only level 2. It's not like Bill Fernie, you have to spend 600 resources to then get that value. Gorbag gets it from just being level 2 from 100 resources. Then you can summon your counterpart, either Gorbag or Shagrat, depending on who you are currently on the field. And then finally, Gorbag can summon some Snaga Orcs, which, if you didn't know, are the Cirith Ungol Halberdiers. It's a temporary Cirith Ungol Halberdier, a temporary elite unit at level 10. That is insane. I did not mean to go back onto the full loadout there, but let's just zoom back into Gorbag. And then let's talk about Shagrat. So as I said, he does have a temporary AoE, which he only gets from his Greed ability, but the AoE also gives him 5 resources per enemy hit with every hit. So that's why typically when I play Mordor, choose Shagrat, because I'm normally not focusing buildings and then using abilities, I'm focusing enemy units. Because we don't really kill things very quickly as Mordor, what we do very well at is just prolonging a fight by weakening them and strengthening us through our 2 tier 1 powers. And he also, instead of summoning an Orc Snitch, which is just your scouting ability, he gives you the building 3 permanent Black Uruk defenders. And they'll just constantly be circling around the building, doing what Black Uruks do. AoE, AoE Uruk damage, which means they will break through any armor. That's what the Black Uruks do. Then again, compulsive cooperation, you summon the other of the two, who just has no abilities, so he's just the bonus attack damage and the and yeah, if they're left alone in an idle stance for too long, they will just attack each other because they hate each other, and then which is also a very nice thing. And then finally, Shagrat can summon Urukai, the Black Uruks, instead of the Killithong or Halberdiers. To be fair, both sides have really good potential, and is worth swapping between them from time to time. And yeah, for those that didn't know, Black Uruks do have the heavy armor damage type, while the Killithong or Halberdiers are just really good against infantry, cavalry, and monsters. They do slashing and cavalry weakening damage, specialist damage. So pick Shagrat if you just want to be dealing as much damage as possible in melee, if you want to be able to use your defending ability. If you want vision and someone a little faster at running around and cavalry Bane, then go for Gorbag. Again, that's why he's such a good hero, so versatile. A lot of Mordor's heroes are very versatile, which is something that I wish would be created for more heroes, because it just makes them better. Anyway, let's move on to the next hero. We have the leader of the Orcs from Minas Morgul, Gothmog, who for me is C tier. He has a lot of good abilities, one of which doesn't really make a lot of sense, him being on a warg, since there's no Orc warg riders. Yes, there's the Nazgul, but they do their own thing. Gothmog should be fighting with the Orcs, which, by the way, he is much larger than. So you're always going to spot Gothmog out of the crowd. His first ability is summoning some Black Orcs, basically a unit's worth of elite Orcs, which do decent damage. Don't last very long, but it's very easy to notice when they're being summoned as well, so you can escape them. Or just keep fighting them regardless. They can't be directly controlled, of course. And they have 142 hit points each compared to 195 of a level 5 Orc unit. Don't ask me why they're level 5. You should already know if you don't already know. Then he has giving nearby Orcs bonus damage and are fearless, which is a good ability. But again, it's counterintuitive when you include the warg as well, because then you're not going to be in melee all the time. You might get killed by pikemen. You want to be staying on foot. I mean, I know he had a warg, and that's a model of him on a warg, which is good and all. I like it. It's just unfortunately it doesn't make sense because there's no Orc warg riders in Mordor compared to like the Gundabad Wolf Riders for Angmar. We won't go too much into that. His next ability is Return the Prisoners. Catapults on the entire map the ability to bombard the enemy with severed heads for a short time. Which is... it's a niche thing. That's why I'm like... it's okay. You're removing the siege damage from the siege units to cause fear. Which, if you're needing to do that with a faction that already has... Let's see. 1, 2... 3, 4, 5 fear abilities. Well, maybe only. But yeah, with this many other fear abilities, do you really need more? And it's not even like Gothmog is more expensive than some of the Nazgul you can get at the beginning. These Nazgul are the same price, if a little bit more expensive than Gothmog. And then finally, the attack order. Nearby Orcs and siege weapons gain attack damage and suffer only 25% damage from archers and siege weapons. Again, another good ability. But it's choice of buffing siege or buffing orcs unless you've got them all clumped together, which if your enemy notices, if it's a player, they're going to hammer that down very quickly. And, yeah. Sometimes abilities like this are a bit back and forth with. Another reason why I think Gothmog is only C tier in my opinion is because he is not the only one who is tied to a certain thing, which we'll talk about way later in the video. The expansions of power. Gothmog is not the only one, because another hero who is a bit more expensive, a bit more difficult to get, but is definitely more worth it, is Moolok, the troll hero which comes from the troll lair. He's actually, Moolok, who is B tier, is actually part of 2 expansions of power, because he counts as one of the trolls you need to command 4 trolls. So I always get Gothmog, but Moolok I would want to get more, if I ever have time to, because I normally end Mordor games too quickly, because his abilities are great. Not only has he got really good stats at base, because he's a troll, but he can just get bonus damage for 40 seconds, dealing up to 100% extra damage with his rage. He can swap between a hammer and a sword. The hammer well, no, let's talk about the sword first. The sword is a wide-range AoE knockback attack. The hammer is a much shorter range, smaller AoE knockback, but does way more damage to buildings. I'm going to take these trolls away because they're being too loud and not behaving. Then we have the leap, one of the strongest abilities of Mordor, because it's stronger than Gimli's leap. Let's just put it that way. That is what makes Moolok so strong. It's only level 5 he gets it at as well. So very quickly you can just be doing Rogash's ability, basically. Catch Rogash, the leap. And it does do insane damage. Remember Rogash in Rise of the Witch King? It does around the same amount of damage. Unnerfed. This has been unnerfed through the ages and now exists in Mordor, which is really good. Then you have Shatterer, which is all you need to do to destroy an enemy building. It's the same as Glóin's Shake Foundations, but instead just disables any building for 1 minute. So even if the building survives the initial hit, it's not being used. And then finally you have Assault Trolls. So you pick your sword form, you pick your hammer form, and then you summon 3 fully upgraded trolls with that weapon. Either hammer or sword. So you do extra building damage or mass slaying. And he is a good building destroyer and mass slayer. Unlike some other heroes that have split roles, Moolok does both of his really well. The only weakness is the fact that he is squishy to pikemen, and that he's very easily noticeable. He's very noticeable. He's difficult to get unless you go for that troll cage very early on. And he is... keep him away from pikemen. Keep him away from pikemen, and this hero can definitely go leaps and bounds above what Gothmog can do on his own. Now we start getting into the real heroes. There's a lot of heroes here. I'm not going to be talking about these 5 here, the Black Riders, because they're technically a pseudo-heroic unit. So they're not included in this. I will start by talking about the Mouth of Sauron, who is one of the first heroes. As you can see here, they all show level 0. For anyone who doesn't know what Mordor's all about, all of the Nazgul and the Mouth of Sauron share their level with Sauron. So if you want Sauron, if you have Sauron level 10, and you just make this Nazgul for the first time, the Shadow Lord, he will be instantly level 10. That alone makes all of these heroes, I'd say, 1 tier above their respective pay grade. But a lot of these heroes are actually really high tier already. And I'll go more into the actual expansions of power when I actually talk about Sauron, because that's going to be about 20 minutes. Let's start by talking about the Mouth of Sauron, who is, for me, A tier so easily. When I was doing the ranking like Hero Slayer video way back, this guy surprised me. Well, I say surprised me, he didn't surprise me. He just keeps on giving even better stuff in the Edain mod compared to what he did in Vanilla Vanilla 2. He can mount and dismount, which, again, kind of similar to Gothmog, but instead he's not buffing enemy allied units. He's weakening enemy units quite effectively. In fact, with Morgul sorcery, he has a lightning sword that does much more controlled AoE bursts, and is also still really good against singular heroes. His Dark Veil can make enemies fight each nearby allies just by targeting any building. Coats a building with dark mist that confuses enemy units, and that can be ally or enemy building, which is very difficult to deal with. Then the Evil Eye just does massive amounts of magic damage, similar again to a Starry Light. These two abilities are reminiscent of Gandalf's hero slaying tools, just in a more dark form, a darker countenance. But it doesn't end there, because the Palantir of the Dark Words comes next, and he has 4 more abilities, which a lot of these you would remember from back in Vanilla. We have the Words of Delusion, make enemies lose their vision and reduce their range, so only really good against archers. So this one, not the best. Then we have Doubt. Enemies lose half their speed, and cavalry are way slower when they're when in their charge. So that's a good way of just weakening all enemies, preventing them from escaping, or just making their charge really, really bad. Have them sit in one position to say, oh, I don't know, use a big AoE ability, which will be going again into not too long. Then we have the Words of Misery. Target enemy heroes, deal half damage for the duration of the ability. Think of it similar to Grima's wordplay ability. That would just make all enemy heroes deal no damage. Not as strong, obviously, but on a much stronger hero that doesn't need to level up by fighting. He just levels up by having completed Sauron's missions to increase his power. And then finally we have Descent. Sets the target needs to fight each other for 20 seconds. That's another just make enemy units fight each other, which is really good. So you have two ways of just making your enemies fight themselves with the Mouth of Sauron. On top of just having hero-slaying tools. You can actually say these two abilities are hero-slaying tools in themselves, because heroes are always unaffected by them, but all the enemy units surrounding the enemy hero are just going to start attacking themselves and the enemy hero. It's really good. Mouth of Sauron, for some of the abilities that he's got are a little bit meh. He's got so many other powers that just compensates for all of it. Really good hero. Definitely the second strongest out of all these heroes, if I'm going from just pure versatility and power. But now we get into the meat, the Nazgul. Let's start with the first two Nazgul you can get from the Citadel. The Dark Marshal and the Shadow Lord, who have two different forms, the Ring Hunter or their respective armor, the armor of the Dark Marshal or the robes of the Shadow Lord. If you pick the Ring Hunter, they can go into a wraith-like state, which we'll talk about with the Witch King, but also can mount on fell beasts on top of horses or just being on foot. But they lose the ability to... Well, they lose their level 10 abilities. But to be fair, the Dark Marshal we're going to be talking about first, he, for me, is C tier, because his level 10 ability is very weird. So firstly, we just have his presence, which is the same as all the other Nazgul. They start off with just a Dread Visage, make enemy units lose all leaderships, have minus damage and minus armor, and this gets buffed for every other ring wraith nearby. You can see here the presence of the Dark Marshal. There is the exact same effect. And they're not able to gain experience. So that's one extra thing, they don't get experience on top of all the other negatives. Then he also has both his Screech and the Morgul Blade. Those are, again, for both of the base Nazgul, but only the Shadow Lord has the Morgul Blade before the armor, before his upgrade, and the Dark Marshal only has his Screech. You only can get these upgrades, if you didn't know, from getting the middle power, his Deadliest Servants. Anyway, back to the Shadow Lord. I'm just talking quickly through these because these two are very similar. The Shadow Lord, for me, is also C tier. He does have some strong tanking potential. He is actually... I don't know why the Dark Marshal moved like that, but okay. The Dark Marshal and the Shadow Lord have the same amount of health, which is lesser, actually, than some of the other heroes that I've mentioned in the past. They have the same amount of damage, which is way higher than some of the other heroes I've already talked about in the past, like, for example, Grima. Yeah, the Dark Marshal, his level 10 ability is weird. All nearby units take massively increased damage from all melee attacks, often perishing from a single strike, which, you know, is going to be almost guaranteed on orcs that have that. I don't exactly understand how the ability works, though. It just says increases damage... oh, no, it's actually been changed. It used to say just remove all armor, but now it says takes massively increased damage from melee attacks. It doesn't actually specify what is happening. I wish I read things before I said them out loud. Before I said things out loud. No, in the flavor text it says their armor seems to do nothing, but all units just take massively increased damage. So it could be like increase the percentage by times 10, for example. So they would take 10 times more damage than what they normally take. That amount is not confirmed. I don't know. Maybe the Unchained team has a more obvious version of that. But yeah, for me, the Dark Marshal is a C tier. He does a lot. Well, no, he doesn't do a lot. Again, wish I would think things in my head a bit more before I said them. But yeah, the Dark Marshal, for me, is a C tier. I will always make him, because I need to make him to get Sauron 1 level, otherwise I'll have to make another hero, like, for example, the Shadow Lord, who, again, Morgul Blade, Screech. And his red visage makes it so the nearer that he is to the nearer enemies are to the Shadow Lord, they deal less and less damage if they're standing in front of him, which makes him more of a tanky hero, but unfortunately doesn't have the health to back it up. He's meant to be... I did rank him quite highly when I was ranking him before. That's because of the Curse of the Shadow Lord when I was ranking him as a tank, because he reflects any damage dealt to him in melee, which is good. The problem is, though, that health can very easily be taken out by any real hero killer. So yeah, hero killers can very easily take out the Nazgul, and the AI typically doesn't actually give these Nazgul their upgrades. They only upgrade Kamor. I've never even seen an upgraded Witch King before for AI Mordor. I think if the AI use these a bit more, they will probably be a bit more terrifying. But honestly, I do feel like they are squishy heroes that need to be protected at all times. Their leadership debuff is their biggest factor. The Morgul Blade doesn't do much until you use the Influence of Sauron onto a Minas Morgul fortress, which, to be fair, I don't typically do a lot because I never really build outposts with Mordor. Or at least not, I don't build this unique outpost. I build the basic outpost for more economy, so I can get all the other things I want. And the Dark Marshal's level 10 ability is... I still don't understand it, and I still don't trust it. So, yeah. Next up, apologies if this is loud, Kamor, who you can only get from the Dol Guldur fortress, which is why, for me, he is B tier. Kamor, for me, is actually really strong. His one weakness is the fact that he has to come from the worst of the two outposts. But just like him, he has armor. But before we go into armor, he does actually have one ability that's unique to hit this armorless form, the Peril of the Nazgul. Disable the target building and cause it to share vision with Kamor for 1 minute. It's an icky ability. Disabling a building for 1 minute is the same as what Moolok does, except it does no damage. It just shares vision for 1 minute. Okay, that's cool. To be fair, this feels the same as it did for like Bill Fernie. It's an ability you're never really going to use and get the most value out of, because why are you just running up to a building, touching it, and then running away? If the enemy is chasing after you, you shouldn't be on your own anyway. But you can also ride a Nazgul, a Fell Beast, at this level. So can the Witch... Oh no, the Witch King can't. Only Kamor can. And there's the sound I was worrying about. Yep. I do apologise for that. I cannot change that. They've had that in for so long. I wish they would remove it. But what can you do? I'll try not to deselect him and reselect him for anything. So, Kamor's presence. He terrifies and weakens his enemies, causing them to lose armor and damage, as well as damaging buildings over time passively. This effect is massively... this ability is okay. You don't see the damage very often because, you're normally surrounded by other orcs doing all the damage themselves. But in Edain Unchained, this ability does way too much damage. I've seen buildings just get destroyed from Kamor just standing on the other side of the screen doing that ability. It's stupid what they did to it. But then we have Dol Guldur's Access. Now for 2 buildings, not for 2 buildings, 2 minutes, the building is set out of action, and some more bat circles around it, so as eyes and ears. The fact it's 2 minutes long is ridiculous, because that is a very long time. That's longer than any other disabling ability in the game. 2 minutes is a long time. He also has the Morgul Blade, like all the other Nazgul, but he has a new thing unique to him. He can summon building destroyers. The Black Easterlings, which come with Forged Blades and heavy armor, so they're already at their best state. At level 1, they have 2,000 health each, same health as Gorbag and or Shagrat, and they do just heavy damage against buildings. That is their whole purpose. You can have up to 3 of them at a time, and I'm not touching Kamul again, because I don't want to risk that Screech again. So now we come to the Witch King, the strongest of Sauron's Nazgul, and for a good reason. He is A tier in my opinion, way above all of the other Nazgul, because his abilities don't only debuff, they also buff the Nazgul when he is in his newer form. As you can see at the moment, he only just has this Screech and the Morgul Corruption. Same, it's just Morgul Blade with a different name. It's all the exact same ability. I understand why they want to give it called different names, but it just does the exact same thing. Now we have the real, the extra meat on the grate, extra meat on the. I'm gonna shut up. Visage of the Witch King. Nearby enemy units lose all leadership bonuses as well as 10% damage and armor, and enemy heroes lose bonus damage and armor. So this is the first ability. This is the first Dread Visage that affects heroes as well. We have enemy units lose experience. Enemy units lose bonus damage if he is nearby. Buildings start to crumble in his presence. But not only are we weakening enemy heroes, we're also buffing all Nazgul with bonus movement speed, vision, and damage. And of course, the buff is the debuff is buffed by every other Nazgul nearby, which does include these 5 gentlemen over here. Yep, for each additional ring wraith with the same effect in the area, the debuff is increased by 5%. This is why I said this is a pseudo hero. They're 5 entities, but only grant 1 stack of that Visage debuff. So that is in total 30% damage and armor reduction, plus another 50% if the Shadow Lord is nearby. They're not gaining experience, and they're just absolutely screwed if the Witch King is nearby. Because not only does he have the Wraith form, he cannot attack or be attacked. He can still use some abilities though, can only be used on foot. So he can still use Terrifying Malice, if I'm not mistaken. Let's just quickly put him in his Wraith form so I can give you an idea. So he can still use Terrifying Malice. Target enemies, special ability, timers are reset to just used. He will very rarely use this ability. I'll admit it's not his best ability. He's had it since vanilla BFME 2. But if used on a very important hero that has very important abilities, that their entire identity is their abilities, Gandalf, Saruman, Galadriel, Celeborn, so many heroes that focus on using their abilities, just set them off, make so they can't be used. And that is what the Witch King does best. He also has the Hour of the Witch King, a ridiculously powerful ability that does a very large AoE. It's around the same AoE effect as Galadriel's mini Word of Power, but does way more damage, does bonus damage to heroes, and then his sword is set aflame, increases damage and attack speed, because he now attacks with his sword instead of his Morningstar flail, because they couldn't decide on whether to keep it as a Morningstar or a flail. So it's a flail Morningstar is what I'm calling it, because it's meant to be he's meant to have a Morningstar, but they gave him a flail in the movies. So he's had that flail ever since. Yep. Witch King for me is definitely just he also has twice the health of his other Nazgul. Let's have a look at Kamul's health through here. He has about 6,000, so the same as Gothmog. The Witch King has more health than has the same amount of health as Moolok, which is crazy to think about. Then when this guy can not only mount back on his horse, which then gives him back his Screech instead of the Wraith form, so he's losing his bad ability for a really powerful ability, and then finally he can mount on his Fell Beast, which means he can't use Hour of the Witch King, but he still has Screech and Terrifying Malice. On top of now doing massive AoE damage, and just being a flying entity makes him very difficult to deal with if you're not prepared. If you're not, for example, AoEing with a Smite, because not every faction is Rohan. But yeah, Witch King, definitely the best out of all the Nazgul. Kamul is just behind him at B tier. I don't think I said that, but I'm just going to say it again now. And the Dark Martial and Shadow Lord for me are C tier, because yes, they're cheaper. Yes, they're easier to get, because you can get them from the Citadel. But their abilities don't quite match up to their other Nazgul counterparts, especially considering that you don't get these extra forms until you get the middle tier power, his deadliest servants. Otherwise, they have just one ability on top of the Dread Visage and the Mount Dismount. And finally, we come to the center stage, the hero of all heroes, especially for the heroes of Mordor, Sauron, the Necromancer as he is to begin with, in this shadowy form, or his fire form. He is A tier, would be, if I had an S tier, he would be an S tier hero. He is possibly one of the best, well-designed heroes in the game, the most complex hero made in the game, because he not just has these two forms. Oh, no. He has more. But we'll talk about that when we get to that point. We're going to start by talking about his first ability, which we've already talked about in part, where all the Nazgul and the Mouth of Sauron are all tied to Sauron and his level. And also, Sauron, when he is defeated, he doesn't die. You don't have to recruit him again. Once he's recruited once, that's it. Never again do you have to recruit Sauron. He will just be gone for a minute or two, and then he will come back in his weakest state in this Necromancer form, where he can do a small teleport, which had to be nerfed. This used to be map-wide movement. Then it got changed to like screen-wide movements, which is obviously a necessary change. Then we come to the influence of Sauron. Choose any building in your entire faction other than a citadel, and it will do something. You choose an economy building, get more economy. You choose a military building, get a military upgrade, fire arrows, troll armor, extra siege. Choose Minas Morgul, one of your outposts, Minas Morgul. The wraiths that are summoned from the Morgul blades will now be turned into wraith can be turned to wraith shadows. Choose Doggle Door, and Spiderlings can become free. I don't know why I would ever do that, because why would you build Doggle Door as anything other than just to get Kamul and the Castellans? Use it on the defense banner here, and you will be able to give your summons from Rune and Harad forged blades and heavy armor, which you can't get anywhere else. Choose the Barracks of Kirith Ungol, your settlement, and you will be able to get even more settlement units that cost no command points, so you always have all three of them up at once. And I think that is all of them. Oh yeah, the Battle Tower, you can get double archers. Whoop-de-doo. Honestly, not worth doing. But yes, two of them, in my opinion, aren't worth doing. The rest of them are worth doing. This ability should never have a full cooldown. You should always be ready to just use it on any other building. Always. Because it's an infinite range. You can use it from all the way on the other side of the map if Sauron wished it. And you always have this power no matter what form you are in. Well, whichever sub-form you are in. Obviously, the fire form has different abilities, but we'll go into that in a minute. Then we have the Dark Swabs, which weakens everyone inside of it, but obviously you want to be using it on enemies. You can move it around for a short time, the higher Sauron's level is, and it also summons Barrow-wights for a short time. These Barrow-wights are different to the ones you make from the Morgul Blades. Just want to make that clear. These are the Barrow-wights of Angmar, which heal on every hit. Then you have the Might of the Damned. Make all units in an area just blow up on death. They will do a mini AoE that does... Yep, the more powerful the unit is you're targeting, the more powerful the damage they deal is. I think it's a link to their damage parameters. So, like the Black Easterlings, a heroic tier unit would do like 1,000 damage, where an orc, a lowly orc that costs nothing except for the cost of the barracks, would probably be only 10 damage, for example. But there'll be a lot more of these orcs than there would be of Black Easterlings, for example. So, still, really good ability. Can just be used over and over again. Obviously, the ability doesn't stack per entity. Then let's talk about his fire form. Instead of attacking with a swath of dark shadows that does very little damage, he now does very little damage from melee by burning his enemies. But that damage can be changed. He can knock back enemies in that small area, can root enemy heroes to the ground so they can't be moved from his burning prison. He can then create a wall of fire to make his damage have a greater area and do more damage, as you can see from the blue aura currently going on. And then we have the Ruler of Flame. Hit allied units, heroes, and monsters. Gain bonus resistance to fire damage for 30 seconds. Enemies become twice as vulnerable to the fire. So this is pretty much as close as you're going to get in this base form to dealing damage. You make it so your units don't take damage, and your enemies take way more damage, which I really like. But it doesn't end there, because with the power of past ages, Sauron can remember his first age form and take it back. The power that was taken from him by the Valar, by the one who rules above all, and become Gothmog, his form back in the first age when he was not the master but the servant, and can take on 3 other forms. The form of a cloud of vampire bats that attacks enemies from the skies. So it becomes as terrifying as the Nazgul. They cannot be touched other than archers or other flying units. Become the Lord of Werewolves and command an army of monstrous cavalry, essentially. But think of them as Beornings, but if they're even faster. Or can become the Lord of Gifts, Annatar, and trick everyone into thinking that he is their ally, only to weaken them at that key moment where you need to strike. But of course, Gothmog is the form I typically keep Sauron with when he gets to the power of past ages, because 1, you get Influence of Sauron still. But secondly, the Blade of Destiny. Every single swing he does, he has Glorfindel's animation, so he's very fast attack speed now. He can now attack with an AoE, knocking enemies down and dealing extra magic damage. So he's now doing Gandalf levels of damage with just his sword. Then he has a Pillar of Flame, which does way more damage than Sauron did back in his fire form. Think of it as his fire form at his best. That is how much damage the Pillar of Flame can do. And then finally he can summon his fortress, stolen from the elves, Tol in Gorhoth, which is where you get Gothmog werewolves. You can summon some vampire bats to weaken enemies around the building. The building also shoots lightning if enemies get too close to it. On top of reducing cost of all heroes by 20% for 600 resources. Decrease melee vulnerability of the building. And of course, release a boiling cauldron of magma upon your enemies for any that dare to destroy this glorious fortress. Of course, you can only have one at a time. Now, I would also talk about his ring hero form, but I think I've talked enough about how Sauron is clearly A tier. He has more versatility than any hero in the game. He is Galadriel and Celeborn put into one hero when he gets power of past ages. When you look at all of his abilities and all he is capable of, you need some way of dealing with a backline that's terrifying archers. You need a way of just keeping enemies weakened while you're constantly fighting in melee. Go vampires. If you want to just dick around the enemy and have Sauron untouchable, then choose Annatar. I'm not going to go over all of their abilities because it's insane what they are capable of in each form. I think I've pretty much covered what each of them does. AoE in the sky, buffs other werewolves, and is very good at killing enemy heroes. Makes all enemies really, really, really wish that you didn't have this version of Sauron. And that is everything for this ranking. And yes, Mordor is probably is a very tough contender for first place, because having 2 A-tier heroes, 3 A-tier heroes puts them above many other factions by quite a large margin. There's no other faction I've shown off at the moment that actually has 3 A-tier heroes. Lothlorien is the only faction that comes close. Ered Luin is another one that comes close with 2 A-tier heroes. I have to say though, there is one other faction that I think comes close. I'll be talking that one next time. See ya.